Welcome to Wiśnicz Castle. It is the second largest preserved fortress in the Lesser Poland region, surpassed only by Krakow's Wawel. It stands as an exceptional example of a dual-purpose structure, both a residence and a stronghold, a true palace fortress. The castle also guarded the important trade route stretched from Krakow to Hungary. Over the centuries, many royal processions passed through here, such as those of King Casimir the Great, Queen Elizabeth, and King Louis of Hungary, as well as King John Albert. The architecture available today largely dates to the second half of the 17th century and has remained virtually unchanged ever since. The castle itself is over 600 years old, with its origins reaching back to the 14th century, when the noble Kmita knightly family of the Świętowa coat of arms first settled here. It was Jan Kmita who began the construction process of the castle in the latter half of the 14th century. For more than 200 years, the Kmita family consistently expanded it and strengthened its fortifications. When the last of the line died without heirs in 1553, the estate became the subject of disputes lasting more than 40 years, until it finally passed into the hands of the Baja family. But Stanisław Baja fell into deep debt and was forced to sell the Wiśnicz estate to Sebastian Lubomirski for 85,000 Polish zlotys. At the time, this was a staggering fortune. To put it in perspective, a single horse of noble breed cost around 300 zlotys, the equivalent of a small village. Sebastian amassed his wealth as administrator of the royal salt mines near Krakow, though he himself mainly resided at the castle in Dobczyce. Wiśnicz Castle reached its peak of grandeur under the rule of Stanisław Lubomirski in the 17th century. The gatehouse you see behind us dates from that very period, a unique early Baroque creation, built in the 17th century with the help of Stanisław Lubomirski's court architect Maciej Trapola. It is a striking example of Italian influence on Polish architecture, modeled after the Arch of Titus in Rome. Its purpose was to glorify the lord of the castle and underscore the power and prestige of Stanisław Lubomirski. A dedicatory plaque also commemorates that in 1621, Stanisław Lubomirski led Polish forces to final victory at the Battle of Chocim.
Of special note is Bona's tower, one of the corner towers, which rises to 36 meters, coincidentally the same length as the castle's well. The tower is linked with a legend, as Queen Bona often visited Wiśnicz Castle. Some claim that, like many queens, she was capable of little more than gracing the castle's chambers. To prove her courage, she is said to have had her favorite donkey brought to the projecting cornice at the top of the tower. Mounted on her donkey, she circled the tower 3 times, demonstrating that she was not only beautiful, but also fearless. When courtiers mocked her feat, she reportedly ordered each skeptic placed on horseback and set high atop the tower. One by one, they fell to their deaths. None could match the queen's daring. And so, legend has it that even today, Queen Bona rides her donkey around the tower by night, appearing as a ghostly white lady. Here, one can see the Świętowa coat of arms, created by the Kmita family, the first knightly house to settle here, drawing its name from the nearby Świętowa River. The river encircled the entire Kraków-Częstochowa upland, lands once held by the Kmitas. Later, the Lubomirski family adopted the same coat of arms, and even today the town of Nowy Wiśnicz bears it proudly. The items displayed here date from the 19th and 20th centuries, brass, copper and silver-plated utensils, recalling the furnishings of a 19th century kitchen. Yet a castle kitchen never stood in this very spot. In fact, castle kitchens were always built apart, so that unpleasant smells, there were no refrigerators in those days, would not drift into the noble chambers. Among the curiosities here, an enormous beer tankard can be found, holding no less than 5 liters. So heavy was the tankard that, without straws, gentlemen would hoist it with their arm as a lever. Ladies fared only slightly better, being allotted a measure of 1.5 liters. Though these drinks were weaker than ours today, not all of them were mild. A unique feature not found elsewhere in the castle can be located here: the medieval toilet, known as the locum secretum. This secret place was reserved for those of noble birth. Next, in the sideboard we find silver-plated tableware. By the 17th century, when full sets of cutlery, including the fork, appeared on the noble table, it was clear that an honored guest was expected. The fork itself only became common in the 18th century, and was once even thought to be a diabolical instrument. Sugar, stored in ornate locked boxes, was a precious commodity. Each resident received but a single teaspoon per year, and so the supply had to be carefully guarded from curious courtiers. It was here, too, that the first Polish cookbook, and the first in Europe written in a vernacular language, was created. Entitled A Collection of Dishes, it was authored by Stanisław Czerniecki. The work contained 300 recipes, 100 for meat, 100 for dairy, and 100 for fish. Yet the master cook provided no weights or measures, no grams, no pounds, no scales. Some say he wished to guard his culinary secrets. Others believe he intended each cook to season and measure according to their own taste. The inner courtyard is known as the heart of our castle. Why the heart? Because here we find an enfilade arrangement of chambers, meaning that as one passes from room to room, the path always circles back around this central courtyard. In the time of the first lords, the Kmita family, wooden galleries encircled the space, serving as balconies. From here alone could one enter the chambers. When the Lubomirski family took possession of this structure, the nearby Wawel castle already stood in its Renaissance grandeur. Inspired by it, the Lubomirskis added cloisters and loggias modeled after those of Wawel. Within, a grand staircase rose in the style of Wawel's Senate staircase. Hidden behind the small windows, a narrow spiral staircase led upward, reserved solely for the servants. It was along this secret passage that attendants carried trays to the upper halls. Those heavy brown doors lead to what were once the castle kitchens. This is the oldest surviving part of the residence, which also housed the dining halls. Opposite, some of the earliest examples of illusionistic windows in Poland can be seen, painted to imitate real openings, a decorative device often used in the baroque. This illusionistic style appears frequently throughout the castle. The chapel was added in the 17th century under the patronage of Stanisław Lubomirski. It was designed by Maciej Trapola, with the collaboration of architect Andreas Pezzi. Above shines one of the most beautiful works of illusionistic painting, created by the Italian artist Giovanni Falconi. It is said to have been modeled after the dome of the Wawel Cathedral. At its summit stands a stone lantern, beneath which an inscription reads in Latin, "Glory to you, Lord, 1621. Once more, a reminder of Stanisław Lubomirski's great victory. The faithful were able to attend Holy Mass here from all 3 levels of the chapel. The most honored, deemed most worthy, worshipped on the floor nearest to the altar. From the chapel also descends a stairway into the crypt. There lie the original sarcophagi, moved after the Second World War from the ruins of a monastery church. They belong to Stanisław Lubomirski himself and his family. Behind the wall are sealed the coffins, 10 or perhaps 11, of the discalced Carmelites, together with the remains of Maciej Trapola. For his service as architect, he was granted the rare honor of burial in his lord's family crypt. The grand staircase was modeled after the Senate stairs of Wawel, broad, with shallow steps. It was said that the most distinguished guests could even be led up into the castle on horseback. The gentle rise of the steps aided not only horses, but also the ladies of the court, whose gowns could weigh 5 to 10 kilograms. Lifting their heavy skirts, they would ascend here to the first floor. This first floor was used as a private level, but it also hosted the vast number of guests who visited. The scale models illustrate the castle at various stages of its expansion. The first shows the stronghold at the end of the 16th century. At that time, the castle was surrounded by a double wooden palisade. Alongside the present entrance gate stood a second, allowing easier access for carriages. Behind the residence stood the palace kitchens, deliberately separated from the main complex. The reason for the separation was fire safety. Castle kitchens often sparked blazes, and so they were kept apart to protect the residents. The central model shows the castle during the age of Stanisław Lubomirski. There, the castle becomes a true palazzo in fortezza, a residential palace within a fortress. Its mighty fortifications represented the most advanced defensive system in all of Poland. Space was made for cannons and archers, and for security reasons, only one entrance remained, the gate available today. A curtain wall was added on the far side, serving also as a barracks for soldiers. Beneath lay the underground stables, while a new tower was erected, Bona's Tower. Later, projecting towers, or risalits, were added, which also brought light into the larger chambers. The chapel was built, and the kitchens expanded and joined to the main complex. The final model shows the castle in the 18th century. By then, the corner bastions were overgrown, and the entrance to the underground stables had been moved to a side ramp. The castle was so wealthy that as many as 1,000 servants were employed here, grooms, cooks, gardeners, and an entire retinue. It was said that if the gates had been shut for 3 years, all within would still have had enough to eat. Such was the abundance of Wiśnicz. But what became of this wealth? In 1655, the Swedes arrived. Knowing they could not take the fortress by force, they spread a rumor that their army, massed below, was 3 times the size of the garrison inside. The gates were opened, and the Swedes entered without resistance. They stayed only a few months, but when they departed, they carried away 150 wagons of treasures, jewels, fabrics, arms, cannon, and priceless works of art. Among them were masterpieces by Raphael, Titian, and Dürer. All were lost forever, and Wiśnicz Castle never again returned to the full splendor of its golden age. The second great blow came at the dawn of the 19th century, when the Potocki family resided here. A massive fire broke out, sparked accidentally during routine roof repairs. Tragically, most of the castle's furnishings were consumed by the element. All the timbered floors, the ceilings, the door frames, everything made of wood was destroyed. When the fire was extinguished, the Potockis gathered their belongings, abandoned the castle, and for more than 140 years no one ever lived here again. Only in the early 20th century did the Lubomirski Family Association regain the rights to the castle, beginning efforts to preserve it. The Second World War interrupted these works, but restoration resumed afterward, led mainly by Professor Alfred Majewski. Since 2019, the castle has belonged to the state treasury. In earlier centuries, the corner towers served purely defensive purposes, garrisoned by knights and soldiers who watched for approaching enemies. Once the great perimeter walls were raised, these towers lost their military importance and were incorporated as extensions of the chambers. The thickness of the outer walls reached 3 meters in some places. On the ceiling is another striking example of illusionistic painting, a style repeated throughout the castle. On the first floor, the exhibitions consist of 19th and 20th century objects, either purchased or donated. These rooms were banquet halls, used to host guests. The greater the number of feasts, the more it reflected the wealth of the castle's lord.
In one of the corner towers, a ghost has taken residence, Barbara Radziwiłłowna, the future Queen of Poland. Her tale is tied to Queen Bona as well. As Bona opposed her son Sigismund Augustus' marriage to Barbara Radziwiłł, she devised a plot. Invite Barbara to a ball at Wiśnicz Castle and poison her. As history tells us, this plan was never carried out. To atone for the scheme and seek forgiveness before God, Kmita hosted the longest ball in the castle's history, lasting 2 full weeks, day and night, without pause.
This chamber is called the Hercules Hall. its panels adorned with scenes of the hero's feats. Another fine example of illusionistic painting, it reflects how Stanisław Lubomirski likened himself to Hercules, a demigod, a hero. Yet this hall was not only symbolic. In the 17th century, it also served as a confessional and, in truth, a chamber of eavesdropping. Lubomirski married Zofia Ostrogska, the wealthiest maiden in the land. Through this union, his fortune was tripled. Wishing to learn his wife's sins, but denied by the priest's oath of secrecy, he ordered this chamber designed so that confessions could be overheard. In one corner he would kneel and feigned prayer, while in the opposite corner Zofia, unaware, confessed aloud. The acoustics were so precisely engineered that even the faintest sound carried perfectly across the diagonal. Thus, nothing was missed. The second floor was the piano nobile, the grand representative floor. Its rooms are loftier and better insulated. On the walls are wallpapers imitating gilded leather hangings, once crafted of lambskins, embossed in ornament. The effect is faithfully recreated here. Displayed on this level are armors crafted by Sergei Numatov, one of Europe's finest armorers. The suits replicate those of the 16th and 17th centuries, each weighing nearly 40 kilograms, like the originals. The exhibition recalls the arms of the era, including the campaigns of 1621 and the Battle of Chodzim. It was then that Stanisław Lubomirski led Polish forces to decisive victory, and in gratitude to God, founded the Carmelite monastery and church in Nowy Wiśnicz. Above is one of the oldest surviving paintworks in the castle. Here too the painted heraldic cartouches are visible. Crescent moons appear among them, giving this chamber its name, the Moon Tower. The castle still boasts an original Hungarian red marble portal, one of the few treasures not carried away by the Swedes. Ahead lies the ballroom, the largest hall in the castle. It covers nearly 300 square meters, rising to over 9 meters in height. Every celebration here was graced by 27 musicians brought from Italy, who lived within the castle walls. The longest ball ever held took place in 1550. In attendance were Queen Bona, Sigismund Augustus, King Sigismund the Old, and Barbara Radziwiłłówna. It lasted for 2 weeks without pause, at the expense of the crown. Each ball began with cannon salutes, fireworks, and performances by acrobats and jesters. The glory of Nowy Wiśnicz itself reached its zenith in the 17th century, when in 1616, thanks to Stanisław Lubomirski, the town was granted its municipal charter. From the viewing terrace, one beholds the breathtaking panorama of Wiśnicz stretching out, the town hall, the church with its belfry, monuments that also date back to the 17th century. They were designed by Stanisław Lubomirski's court architect, Maciej Trapola. Together they form a magnificent pearl of baroque art. The so-called plafond hall takes its name from the ceiling painting that towers above. It originates from Wiśnicz Castle in Wałbrzych. The plafond was acquired in the post-war years and reconstructed, among others, under the direction of Professor Majewski. The hall in which the artwork was installed was named after it. It was brought here from Wiśnicz Castle after the Second World War. In its medallions, one can see the sky dotted with clouds. This artistic treatment is the work of Agnieszka Holanol. The feature film Janosik was once shot here. Originally, however, the ceiling would likely have depicted sacred art, religious motifs, or scenes from the lives of saints. The plafond gives the illusion of gold dripping from the ceiling. In earlier times, every detail was gilded with 24-karat gold leaf. Now we find ourselves in the underground stables, among the longest such stables in all of Lesser Poland. They stretch 92 meters in length. Here, Stanisław Lubomirski kept 60 white stallions, horses of immense value. Each was worth 300 Polish zloty, the equivalent of an entire small village. Some say they formed the private guard of Lubomirski himself. The adjoining chambers served as torture rooms and prison cells. Today they house medieval instruments of torture, crafted by the Italian Society from Verona.
It is open all year round and often serves as a venue for cultural events. The castle also offers a rich program of workshops for groups of all ages. Visitors who come here not only gain knowledge of history, but also enjoy an engaging and memorable experience.